All right, so this week's prompt was discuss your thoughts on organizational culture. What types of organizational cultures have you experienced in the workplace? And if you believe that leadership can shape the culture. So for me, I think definitely leadership shapes the culture. And what really stood out to me moving to my company I work at now from One Stop Nutrition, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but like a family kind of feeling and just making smoothies all day. And then I moved to this big, corporation working there. And it was definitely like a culture shock for me. Like it said in the book, like even just moving to new companies, you can have a culture shock. And one of the things that really stood out to me was how they taught their values, like just coming into the company. They spent like educating us on like the values, the mission, the vision, everything. So that way it kind of helped all of the new people get like buy into what it was and really show us the importance of our jobs, even though we were just like starting out, low level employees at that point. So having that initial like education around the values really helped, I think, everybody that was coming into the company really buy into the culture and kind of have more of an identity with the company as well. So I thought that was just like a really, really important thing that stood out to me compared to other companies that I've worked for. Whereas they're just like, oh, this is what you're going to do, go do it. They kind of gave us all the background information to get our buy-in to the culture.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've worked at only like food service, but like every restaurant definitely has its own like culture within it, even if they're like pretty similar type of restaurant. But like, and I've noticed it depends on who the leaders are, like kind of shape that culture. Like my very first job was at a pizza place, and my managers were like two middle-aged moms who were like pretty by the book. So like it was a pretty like very like not serious, but like you had to be on time. Like there wasn't a lot of like you had to follow the rules. And then my second job was at a Dairy Queen, and my manager was like a 19-year-old high school dropout who smoked a bunch of pot and like didn't really care and knew the owners of the like store. And that was like the weirdest job I've ever worked at. Like I don't know how anything ever got done. Like we literally just messed around like the entire time. And then now I work in a kitchen, and it's like with a bunch of guys. And so that like not working in the front being like a server, like in the back, it's like a lot more laid back and like a lot. Oh, I think never mind. Anyway, but yeah, so I definitely think leaders do shape the culture.
Yeah, I've worked I've worked with Starbucks most of the time. But I did spend my first job was American Eagle, which is kind of funny. And it's kind of crazy, just like, so I've worked under numerous store managers, and they all have different, they'll all have the same general set of values, or in this, that what they post, that they say, oh, customer first, all this kind of stuff. But then you could tell what their actual values are based off of, like what they reward, for example, or just how like when going through the primary mechanisms in the textbook, all of those kept recalling these things that the store managers would do that would reflect their true values. Like they might say customer first, but then they only reward efficiency, for example. They never go out and reward or punish, or hold people accountable to poor customer service. And that kind of reflects they have a higher value for efficiency than customer service, for example. And so one of the things that I think, like one of the good store manager that I've had, she really role modeled good customer service and placed a high value and would reward whenever we would provide exceptional service. And you could just tell that, like, just because of the way that she enforced certain values or rewarded or demonstrated certain things, it totally changes the climate of the store. And the same thing can apply to that's Starbucks or American Eagle or wherever I've been. Leaders definitely, they take whatever the mission or the value or the mission or the vision is, and then they're the ones that are supposed to execute it, and they really do build the climate a lot. And so I definitely think that they do play a role there, because you'll see, like, I just moved to another store, and even just looking at how all of the lower level employees behave, they're very different from the last one that I was at, because they all kind of follow suit after how the store manager demonstrates and leads throughout the store. So
yeah, so my old job in Nevada, where I just moved from, I was working in a call center, but it was like a super high-end call center. And so our teams, we would have like teams of like 8 or so, and each team would have like a team leader. And it was crazy to see the difference in leaders. My team lead was so nice, so helpful. She was always the first one to jump up if like we even had like a questionable face on us. Like if anything was wrong, she was the first one to help out. Always engaging and always being super positive in the situations and always lending her helping hand, because that's what she was supposed to do, compared to like where we would hear stories from like other teams where they would be like, oh, like our team lead doesn't help us at all, like we only get like negative vibes. And so I think the different forms of leaders is so important. And then now I'm at my job, my old job, where I've worked for like 8 years just serving, because I came back to focus on school. And now it's like so laid back. I can do everything with my eyes closed because I've been there for so long. And it's so weird to see how one job is structured and then going back to a different one and seeing how that one is.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I've worked at, I've had 4 jobs. So I was at a restaurant when I was super young. Then I worked for Albertsons. Then I worked for Target, and then I worked for Starbucks. So I've worked for 3 major organizations, and I can totally look at it as Target was probably the worst job I've ever had. So I was an executive team lead there. When they talk about, so in the video, in the book, it talks about assumptions, values, and artifacts, and like the assumptions are the environment they make for you. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Target, but they used to have, their motto was fast, fun, and friendly. It's not that anymore, but that's what it was when I worked there. And they were not fast, fun, or friendly. And I worked for several, so I came from Albertsons and I worked there for 9.5 years. So it was like that homegrown, like I started when I was 15, and
yeah,
like I totally was like committed to the company. And I saw people like they either retire or they get fired. You like don't get promoted unless that happens. And then I go into this world of Target, and I worked for, I want to say 4 store managers in 3 years. So they were just kind of like rotating around. And when I say like the company was like putting an image out to their customers, like if you watch their commercials, you're like, oh, it's like modern and hip, and like you just felt like the vibe at Target was like it would be a great company to work for. That was not what it was when I worked there. And even like their symbols, so like they talk about artifacts, and like the symbol was that Target dog with like the one eye, right? Like everybody knows the Target dog. And it was supposed to be like fun commercials. And I mean, I'm telling you, like complete opposite experience when you go in there. And so one of the things that like rang to me was, don't let your job be like a stepping stone or you're never committed to it, right? And that's kind of what I hear people say that at Starbucks, because I work at Starbucks, and they're like, oh, this is just my job until I graduate college or I get a real job. And you're never going to put forth your effort when you think that way. But like, honestly, I get that mentality, because when I was at Target, I was like, okay, I got to figure out where to go from here, because this is not like a career job. This is not something I'm going to go to the grave or retire from.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking how it says like the three things that like kind of make up a culture were assumptions, and then which are like the unstated beliefs, and then the values and the symbols. And I was thinking that like the values are kind of like, I feel like the fake front, like what you were talking about with like Target, like where it's kind of what they like aspire to, or what they want to kind of project like that they do. But I feel like the assumptions, like the hidden beliefs, are what actually drives the culture. And like actually, so yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
It also talks a lot about how like language is a huge part of like leadership in a culture and stuff. So that part was super interesting to me. Because then that ties back in with like the relationships with your employees and like the values and that you hold and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the store manager that I just left from, who I don't consider a very good store manager at all. During my last week there, I realized that whenever she would talk about the store or like certain items in the store, she wouldn't say it's our oven or our
She would
like
say
Clover machine. She would say mine. She would be like, "This is my drive-through time. Like, we need to fix my drive-through timer and my Clover." And I was just like, "What on earth?" Like, that's a easy way to disconnect with your team. Like, oh
yeah,
you guys are all working for me. This is my stuff, and you guys are supposed to, and that
It's
was just
an
like another.
80s manager.
What's that?
I said it's like an 80s manager. I worked
Yeah.
for one of
It was very annoying. I was like, come on now. Not It doesn't make any, and everyone's like, I have some connection still with that store, and everyone there seems to be trying to leave, and so it's definitely and meanwhile the store I'm at right now, everyone has stayed there for a long time, and it's crazy how just all these little things that leaders can do that can whether they can keep their staff or have their staff constantly turning over on itself. And it's crazy to see, because like Starbucks is a company that has really good mission and values, at least from the corporate, what they feed to us, but that doesn't guarantee that the store managers or the employees at the lower levels are actually going to be carrying that out. And so that's kind of something that's can easily observable from my end here.
Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed in the book, how it was saying that like a lot of the entry level employees, they don't get like the best management. So that can, I mean, of course that's going to lead to bad things within an organization, even if the upper management values and things that they set forth are good. If that's not being followed through on the lower levels, it can create, not a super positive culture. One of the things that I really liked in the Zappos examples that we got was just like the fun environment that they created, and they were able to make it so that the people that work there, they didn't feel like it was a stepping stone or something. They really were committed to the organization, and they made it like a fun place to come. So everybody wanted to come back to work, and then they wanted to, like they said, if they were thinking about their jobs when they're not at work, just trying to improve the company.
That's what I thought that statement in the video struck a chord with me too. Like, oh, they might not be working super efficiently while they're on the clock, but because they've been totally bought into this culture, they're actually thinking about it and being creative when they're off the clock. And that's something I've definitely experienced, like at Starbucks too. I think, and I also think about the example in the book with the Container Store. And my dad actually works at the Container Store, which is kind of fun. And they have a very employee based, like they care about their employees the most. And at first you kind of think like, oh, even more than their customers. But then after a while you realize like, oh, if they really care about their employees are going to be able to take that to the customers. And so I thought that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, that's always how it works too. I've had so many different bosses, and the one that I have now doesn't engage with his employees at all. Just doesn't really know how to, I want to say. And it reflects because the like poor management skills that he gives to us reflect on how we work and how we clean up the restaurant, or how, you know, we're engaging with other customers, because for people who have been there for a shorter amount of times, they don't really have a role model to like go base things off of, or someone that they can turn to ask questions, because he just doesn't make himself available. He doesn't try to put any effort in with his employees, and you can kind of tell, and it'll show through your employees always.
Well, I thought it was cool that the CEO of Zappos, when they moved their facility from California to Nevada, like it was the discussion of like, what do we want to make this look like? And it wasn't, he didn't want it to be like the Google or the Apple, like how they had kind of their own community or their own city for those employees, but he opened it up to make it like a community, so that there wasn't a separation between the outside and the inside. I thought that was super cool, because that's really truly like creating the environment, which is what we're talking about, right? The assumptions, and you know, you're really creating an environment for your employees. Like, you're not separating them. Like, I'm a Google employee and you can't come in here. It was like creating a facility where people could come and go, whether it was public or private. That was really cool.
All right, so we are at 14 minutes roughly right now. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to add in before we end the broadcast?
I think I'm good.
Good.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys.